Welcome to The State of Us. Real people with honest opinions and the future of responsible media. Here's your host, Justin T. Weller.
Today, just 100 families own about 42 million acres across the country, a 65,000-mile expanse, according to the Land Report. That's a magazine that tracks large purchases. Researchers at the magazine have found that the amount of land owned by those 100 families has jumped 50% since 2007. 50% is a lot, generally speaking, just when you say a 50% increase, but 50% land ownership increase since 2007.
For a few families.
For a few families. Why do you care about this land being bought up out west? Well, the New York Times, which is who we're referencing for this information, ran a story a couple weeks ago entitled "Billionaire Landowners Redraw Old Boundaries Across the West." Now, as simple as that headline may make it sound, there are some important things that we want to walk you through here. But battles over land in the West have been going on pretty much since the 1800s, maybe even before that, Lance. What do you think? It's been a long time.
Oh, yeah.
And the
depends if you want to go back to the Spanish or whatever. I mean,
and so I think people care because a lot of this involves the change in access to public land. And ultimately, whether or not it should be this way, land often is equal to wealth, and wealth is often equal to power. And 100 families owning 42 million acres. What's our division math there, Lance? How many acres per family? Is quite astonishing. But of course, we can't begin this critical conversation without
your friendly redneck liberal, Lance Jackson.
Is that 420,000? I don't know. I'm guessing there.
I'm pulling it up.
Trying to do my zeros in my math. You're right. I mean, as far as land, but I think, and again, I don't know if the article, I don't remember if it mentions this or not, the biggest landowner out west is the United States government. But what you have is people with all this wealth. It's like, wow, the land is cheap. It's pretty. You know, I mean, we're talking about where they're buying land is, the buffalo roam and the deer and the antelope play, and it's a sign of status, and you can do all kinds of things there. And it is a pretty getaway, especially if you're coming from California, where a lot of these people since 2007 have bought the land, where you go from people on top of you and land being very, very expensive, that you can go out here and take your money and buy a view big enough that you don't ever have to see another person. You know, I'm thinking of, the show that you and I both watched a few years ago on Netflix, Longmire, where he had his log cabin.
Yep. And
it was, filmed in Big Sky Country in Montana. And you just look out across and you see these blue clouds forever, and then a mountaintop, and then all this wild animals just, running around out there. And it's like, yeah, that would be very enticing. And you have the money and the land's available. Obviously if you buy it, somebody was willing to sell it.
Yep.
So
from before, that's 420,000 acres per family.
Oh, I love the concept of zero. I got that one right.
Yes.
Isn't that what I said? I meant to say that.
Anyway. I think so.
Okay.
We can, what's that? Play back the tape.
Play back the tape and see. But you listeners, you probably heard me.
The federal government, Lance.
Justin had used a calculator, and I used the old man brain, and I got the number before him.
So these 100 families own 42 million acres, right? The federal government, in contrast, owns 640 million acres.
See, I said that too, didn't I? Right? The federal government is still the largest landowner of the Western lands.
Which is about 28% of the total land area of the United States. The total land area being 2.27 billion acres.
Which means the United States government still owns most of the land in the United States.
Yes. They're the single largest landowner.
Which is why the Bureau of Land Management is should be a very powerful and group within the government.
So there's a lot of, is it fair, Lance, to say that, with all this presidential election stuff on, there's a lot of talk about billionaires and all that.
Right.
And that how they're just these terrible people and they're evil and they suck money and they just, they're born into this awesome privilege. And there, I mean, I'm not saying that there's not any truth in that, but we just want to be clear about who these people specifically are.
Right.
So we're going to give you the one example. There's more than one example because the New York Times always does these, huge spreads.
And there's 100 families, so there should be at least 100 examples.
There should be at least 100, right?
But I don't know new math, but I think that would be 100 families would be 100 examples.
One of the larger landowners, the Wilkes brothers, grew up in a goat shed. They never finished high school, and they built a $1 billion fracking business from the ground up.
See, you already turned off a lot of people.
What's that?
I mean, yes, they are successful. They came from nothing, but they're involved in fracking.
I know.
That's an issue that would upset a lot of people. But anyway, don't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
So
jolly good for them that they were able to make a business out of nothing. But
well, and then you also wonder though, what was their knowledge when they got into this business about the real, because I mean, we didn't, in fairness, the public, and I think a lot of the people surrounding fracking really didn't understand the implications of it until
it was too late.
Until $1 billion businesses had already been built. $100 billion businesses had already been built. So when these,
anyway, the Wilkes brothers.
Yeah. So when these brothers bought a vast stretch of mountains, studded land in southwest Idaho, it was not just an investment, but a sign of their good fortune. We feel that we have a responsibility to the land. Through hard work and determination, and they didn't have a lot of privilege, they reached success, added Dan's son, whose name happens to be Justin. The Wilkeses, who now own some 700,000 acres across several states, have become a symbol of the out-of-touch owner. In Idaho, as their property has expanded, the brothers have shuttered trails and hired armed guards to patrol their acres, blocking and stemming access not only to their private property, but also to some publicly owned areas. This has drawn criticism from everyday, how do we say Idahoans? Idahoans? Somebody from Idaho, let us know, please.
If you're listening.
Not entirely sure. I'm very sorry. It's not quite as easy as Ohioans or, Floridians isn't terribly easy.
It would be
either.
easy if you were from Idaho.
Sure. Who have hiked and hunted in the hills for generations. So their criticism, Lance, is that wealthier buyers are purchasing even larger parcels, and that's intensifying the battle. Many local residents see these new owners as a threat to the way of life beloved for its easy access to the outdoors, and they complain that the property they once saw as public is being taken away from them. So some of the complaints are they're buying public land, and then it's not public.
Mm-hmm.
That's a discussion kind of in and of its own of maybe the government shouldn't sell this, but I'm not sure, can you be mad if somebody buys it and then they don't want you on it? The bigger problem that people are complaining about is they're buying land and then there's no way to get
you can't access the public land. That's where I have the problem.
Right.
I mean, if the land goes up for sale, and I guess I'm enough of a capitalist, if the land goes up for sale and somebody has the money to buy it, they have the right to buy it. And if you don't like it and all of a sudden, they do something with it that you didn't like, well, you had the same opportunity as they did to purchase it. But where I have a problem with it is, okay, I buy this land, but the waterway or those hunting grounds are public lands owned by the, state of Idaho or the federal government. But now there's not an access road for me to get to it, and you're not allowing me to get to it. That doesn't seem right. That doesn't seem again, but who's to blame? The people who bought the land or the government who sold it? Why did you sell them land that took away access to other public land that they did not buy?
Right.
That seems like, so I don't know where the blame falls, but that would upset me, that aspect of it.
So I'm showing Lance something that you all can't see, but this article is linked at thestateofus.org. So this is a new feature for those of you who haven't heard yet. You can go to thestateofus.org. That's on your phone or your computer. And you scroll down to the bottom of the page and there's a news and updates section. So we'll have this New York Times article linked there so that you can see what we're talking about if you want to. But the simple explanation here is it's really not, when you look at it, that they've fully blocked access to any public land, but it is that they own these huge stretches, 290 miles or further.
Well, sure,
long.
you can drive all the way around it to get in there.
So, I mean, in their defense, they would say we're not preventing someone from getting it. We've bought land, that happens to border public land, which is hard not to do because in Idaho, 68%, right? So almost 7 out of 10 acres is owned by the government. So there's a lot of public land.
But if I have a home on the east side of the mountain and then they bought the mountain, then I have to drive 300 miles to get to the west side of the mountain to hunt where
even
I
though it's
hunt,
actually only a couple miles
fish,
away.
Right.
Yes.
And that's, and I've grown up there but that's the way I am. I mean, it's not to the same amount, but we were discussing this at home last night. There are in my little tiny burg of Kings Creek, there was land that became available and I could have bought it, but I decided not to. And then somebody bought it across the road from me. And now they've built a really nice house and a garage and everything. But it's like, I look out and I see a house and a garage. And I'm used to seeing open green grass.
And you could have bought it.
And I could have bought it and I didn't. Somebody else did. And crap, now, I've got to look at this nice house and garage instead of open land. So it's hard to complain when it's put up for sale and somebody buys it. I understand it. It's a much smaller scale. I understand that, but it's still part of, I see both sides of it. It was available and you didn't do it. And then this isn't a new thing. Talking about history, you've got your Rockefellers and your JP Morgans and your Carnegies, are they robber barons or are they captains of industry? Are these people have made their money, they're buying land. And I know you're going to get into this in the second half of the show, but some of them are taking it and trying to be environmentalists. They're buying in and trying to save some of the natural species and to clean up the water and to buy it to stop somebody else from a company from buying it and abusing the land or strip mining or whatever. So again, there's this give and take. Well, they're buying it up and now I can't hunt there anymore. But by the same token, they're saving it so that DuPont or Dow Chemical or somebody doesn't buy it and ruin the view and the land and the landscape by getting some kind of ore or something else out of there that would disrupt the beauty of the local landscape. So
the article does point out and provide reference to John Malone, for instance, who has been praised for his family's conservation efforts, and other buyers who are numerous that have helped to actually clean up trails and restore pristine acres.
There you go.
So there are some people who are buying it, keeping it open to the public, and investing their own money to take better care of it than it was being taken care of previously. So it is to say that, how obviously the majority of these people are owning it for
you can't throw all 100 owners
right
into the same hat and point fingers at them and say, you are all evil people.
Yeah.
And because, hey, number one, I bought it and it's mine, so I can do what I want with it. But then there's also another group of people that are buying it and trying to save it and trying to keep it and actually improving it for the natural environment.
So the one stat, we've talked a little bit about the 100 families, the acreage they own. The one stat that I think, again, stuck out, perhaps not the most, but definitely is the one that I think needs some explaining, Lance, is the fact that these researchers found that the amount of land owned by those 100 families jumped 50% since 2007. Okay. So we're talking about in 2007, what they owned was way less than what it is today.
Mm-hmm.
And the question is, why has all this suddenly, changed as drastically as it has, where it wasn't increasing at nearly this type of pace previously? What's causing this interest all of a sudden in purchasing up more land than they had owned in the past? So we're going to look at that, because I have an answer for you. Sorry, I didn't mean.
So do I. I didn't know if you were asking me a question or if I had to wait.
You were looking
I thought
at
we
me
were
like,
going into the mid-show. I thought we were going into, talking to our audience about other things. And
well, why don't you tell us?
Then you threw that out there, and I'm like, oh, was I supposed to answer that? I wasn't.
You're eager, so
I am.
So what do we?
Our mission?
Yeah.
Okay, it's time for our mission, folks. And our mission here at TrueChat is to educate people by providing honest, open, and respectful conversations, which we try to do on every show.
Absolutely. And this article, again, is one you can access on the State of Us.
That's a cool feature because we always tell people where we get it.
Yeah.
So that they can go find it. But now the way you explained it to me, if they hit to listen to the show, they have access to where we are garnering our information.
That's right. And
that's a cool thing to do.
It's just a one click.
Makes it easier.
It'll actually show you, Lance, the headline, the original article's headline, and the picture, and a little excerpt. And then when you click on it, it'll tell you where it's from. So like if it says, for example, if it says the State of Us, it'll open right there on our website and you can read more about whatever we've put up. Okay. If it says the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, then you know when you click on it, it's going to take you to that article on that site. So it'll actually take you.
And we have the right to do that from the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal. We're not going to get in trouble or anything. We don't have an ethics problem there.
I don't think so.
Okay.
I mean, the author's info is right there. And we're not redistributing the whole article, just a, little tidbit.
Just snippets of it. Okay.
Say, go here and check it out. I mean, we are directing it to their site, so it's not like we're keeping them using their content and making money off of it.
I just want to make sure.
I don't know.
I don't want to be named in a lawsuit or anything.
Well, maybe. I'll say it was him. It was his idea. Lance is the tech guy. Question him under oath.
People will believe that. I got character witnesses on my tech ability. No way you'll be able to win that one.
Yes. So, before we continue and talk about why has the amount of land owned jumped so significantly since 2007 by these 100 families, we have to take a quick moment to hear from one of our sponsors. Welcome back. Today, just 100 families own about 42 million acres across the country. That amount owned by those 100 families has jumped 50% since 2007. 50% since 2007.
That's a big number for you for today's show.
It's a lot of, when you think about it in terms of land. Yeah. I mean, you just say a 50% increase.
That means if I had 4 acres and I increased it by 50%, I bought 2 more.
Right.
So it's not necessarily a big number. Depends on how many you owned before as to how big the 50%
Well,
is.
in this case, they're at 42 million acres.
I'm just saying, okay?
So we're talking about
one of my daughters is taking statistics. I can't even say that word. Statistics right now.
How many acres do you own, Lance?
How many do I?
Approximately.
2.33.
Okay. And we're talking about millions of acres.
Right. But if I got 50% more, I'd buy 1.167.
Right. But these 100 landowners own
more than that?
A little bit more than you do.
Okay.
And me. And everybody else probably that we know put together. So,
but the 50% number is like, tell me how many more acres they bought.
Okay.
Instead of 50%. I think you're hyperbolizing. Did they buy how many more acres? 16 million more acres?
Yeah.
Okay.
Something like that, right?
Okay.
Something like somewhere between 14 and 18.
Because it's 42 million, right?
Yeah, it's 42 million.
So now we got a story problem. It's a word problem. If they now own 42 million and they bought 50% more
since 2007, what did they own in 2007? What did they own
in 2006?
Your math lesson for today.
So it would be about 20. It would be 20. They own 28 million and they bought 50% more, which would be 14 million, which now gives them a grand total of 42 million. Again, without pencil and paper, folks.
Right.
And to my junior high algebra teacher, boom, I did it. I know it, but I can't prove it to you. I didn't write it in the right formula, but I got the correct answer mathematically.
Where's your sketchbook?
Thank you.
Well, you don't have your sketchbook.
We know we've got the new intern. We've got 2 interns. We got the new intern. I didn't want to complain because I'm so glad he's in today so that you're not sitting in there and I get to look at your ugly mug across from me.
Thanks.
So but I didn't want to chastise Bradley Lee for not having my sketchbook.
Bradley Lee. I love it.
But it just proves that I can do.
He definitely has a better name than our other producer, I think.
Yeah, sure. Caleb.
Being mean to him. I wonder.
Caleb NHS Spinner.
I wonder if he will.
I mean, that's his middle name, right? NHS?
NHS.
Yeah.
NHS. Yep.
If he's not listening, it'll teach him to listen. Right? I mean,
I have to tell him.
I learned that lesson years ago. I wouldn't be on the show and all of a sudden you guys are like, oh, you should have listened.
Yeah.
You guys blasted me when I wasn't here. That's why I show up every day. Is because if I don't show up, you talk about me.
So the reason for this
14 million
acre increase since 2007.
Which is 50%. Did you know that?
It is.
Okay.
I did. We figured that out, right? So couple things going on.
Why did they do this? I have an answer, but you said you had one. So you go first.
Okay. Well,
is this your answer or is this
This is the articles.
Okay.
I'm just relaying.
I'll see if mine matches.
The arrival of this new class of landholders comes as the region is experiencing the fastest population boom in the country. So that one I think is pretty notable.
Okay.
This region is experiencing the fastest population boom in the country, which is driving up housing prices and the cost of living and leaving many residents fearful of losing their culture and economic stability. In 2018, so just a year ago, more than 20,000 Californians arrived in Idaho. Home prices around Boise also jumped 17%. This has meant not just new subdivisions and microbreweries, but also packed schools, crowded ski trails, and heightened anxiety among teachers, plumbers, and others who are finding that they can no longer afford a first home. Mm-hmm. So you have all these people from California that are moving in, 20,000 of them.
Which we have one of them in the studio with us.
We have a Californian in the studio.
Mm-hmm. Well, these evil people that you're talking about.
I didn't say it. I didn't say they were evil. But they are.
That's what he said, didn't he?
They have very valuable land.
You evil people coming in and stealing these Idahoans' land. All right.
Idahoans? I think so. I thought you would know this.
What's that?
You used to live closer to them than we do now.
Idaho?
Yeah.
Never been to Idaho in my life.
Really? You've never been?
I like their potatoes.
I drove through Idaho once.
I like their potatoes.
Okay. So
Wyoming. I got to Wyoming.
Basically. And the article doesn't say this, but it would seem to me this massive influx of people from California is probably a result of realizing that it's really expensive to live in California. And as that continues to get worse, the producer needs to make his statistics for us a little bigger. But as that continues to get worse, you have people who all over the country in these massive metro areas are looking and saying, right, I could probably sell my house and afford 4 or 5 times the amount of land and a nicer house if I moved someplace else, especially someplace like this where there's not all that development out in Idaho.
Well, but our visitor told us that pre-show that, in their neighborhood in Orange County, a person just sold their home, one house, and moved not to Idaho, but to Texas and was able to buy 3 houses. So I mean, why wouldn't you do that if your money would go further? I was going to guess too, 2007, that was the .com bubble burst and the housing market, flatlined. Well, why would you invest in property, quote, normal property? You would take your earnings and go buy where your money would go further. Mm-hmm. So, if I am very rich, that's a good time to start buying land is when the market drops, right? And so if land prices dropped all across the United States and you're in an area where you already had a lot of money, you're going to invest it where it's the cheapest. Would you not? I mean, that makes sense too. I mean, that's kind of what I was guessing, which is maybe what they're saying in a roundabout way is that when the housing market dropped, and people had to invest their money somewhere, why not go somewhere where it's the cheapest? Yeah.
Well, and I think the other factors coming into play, I mean, you look at, why are all these wealthy people buying this up? I mean,
I have to invest my money somewhere.
Right.
You want just to sit in the bank?
Well, and they probably have some of the foresight here to realize you've got this boom in these people moving out this way. So if I buy up all this land now real cheap, then I can sell it again if I decide to at a profit. And obviously, in some cases, there's natural resources to be exploited.
Yeah, really some interesting information from the United States Census Bureau that Bradley pulled up for us. 1.7 million people live in Idaho as of July of last year. Median value of owner-occupied housing units for 2013 to 2017 is $177,000. Median selected monthly owner cost without a mortgage. Median gross rent is $800, $792. So why not if you live in California where I know the median house crazy, right? I mean, it's a whole lot more. I'm looking at my brother-in-law who's from California, lived in Ohio, but my house, which is barely, we're here in Champaign County of Ohio, barely worth 120, maybe. I could get 150 because of the school district it sits in. Sitting in Mission Viejo, California, would it be worth, and I'm looking, be worth about $1 million? 750? Do what? 700,000? 700,000. So my house here worth 100,000 is worth 700,000 there. But no, wait a minute. I've got 2.3 acres.
Yeah,
2.3 acres.
I was going to say, I'm getting,
now I'm looking
several $million.
Right. So you think of, this is where these people come from. This is where I'm going with this, folks. If I had that kind of, if I had bought my home 30 or 40 years ago in California and I can sell it for a couple million and then I go there, I can, a $200,000 home, I can buy, if I've got 3 or 4 kids, I can buy everybody a house with money left over to go on vacation.
You could probably, I'm just thinking about property value here and then the difference out there. I mean, you're probably talking, you could buy 70 acres, Lance, and put a few houses on it.
If you could find it.
Right. And that's the.
And I can't find it in California, but I can find it in Idaho. Mm-hmm. I can find it in Wyoming. I can find it in these Western lands because the government owns most of that land. So it's a buyer's market. And so you're talking about people who have money, or even if they don't have money, their home is worth so much money that they could sell their home and then buy a nicer house for a lot less money and have money left over.
So is this,
and almost retire on what they sold their house for.
Is this something we need to do anything about?
Well,
because that's where we end, right?
So the problem
is this something we've told people that they need to be aware of it?
Like I said, I don't like the fact that somebody built a house across from me, but the land was available and I didn't buy it, and somebody else did, and they improved it, and they brought little kids back into the neighborhood, which I like, and I like seeing them out there and hearing them play, and so there's a positive concept to it as well. So explain to me, really, what's the problem? You don't like it that somebody took away something that you've had, but you had equal opportunity to get it as well. And many of them are making improvements to the area. I understand the frustration, but I mean, what do we want to see done? Let the government continue to own it and not have it be saved? I'm thinking of Ted Turner, and I don't know if you remember Ted Turner, the old media mogul who started Atlanta and TBS and the superstations and all that, married Jane Fonda. But he took a lot of his money and bought up all this land out west and brought the buffalo herds back and did all, the elk, and now has this booming place where all this natural life that was gone is now there because he invested the money and he was big into the green stuff back in the 70s and the 80s. And now he has this huge place that allows the animals to roam like it did in the old days. Is that a bad thing?
The government could probably do a better job of ensuring that if people are going to purchase, for example, a 300-mile stretch of property that borders public land, that there is somewhere along there access routes that are publicly owned that allow you to get back and forth. Because, for example, if the thing's only a mile wide, but as we pointed out before, 300 miles or something long,
sure, now
you've created a 4-hour drive for people, or possibly longer, because there may not just be a road that
goes that way.
So maybe you're talking about a whole day to get to something that's only a few miles away.
Okay.
And I don't think I don't think that drastically, it doesn't infringe on anybody's rights. It's kind of like if the government's the one going to sell it, it has the right to put whatever stipulation it wants. It could say, for example, you can't use this for fracking if it wanted to.
Right.
Not that it should, but I'm saying it can, and it can say you're going to have to cut, 2 or 3 access roads that run through your land that you can't gate or keep people off of. You're welcome to fence along them or whatever so that people can't, so that they don't think they can just stop wherever on this road and, screw around on your property.
Okay.
But you can't block the road, which actually is one of the issues that the article talks about there, where there was a situation where there was a road, both sides were owned by, the Wilkes brothers, and they actually gated it off because they're saying, it's our land.
Right.
And so there was a whole debate about, well, you can't, so
I think it's in the court system. Right. I don't think there's been a decision.
There hasn't been.
It's in the court system.
In other words, it's a public road, but if you own the land on both sides, and, then you own everything to the center of the road, do you have the right to, I don't know, that's obviously for the courts to decide. So I think some of that has to be figured out. And then based on that, from a legislative standpoint, states and the Fed have to decide, are we okay with allowing access to public land to be cut this way? And maybe we are. Because like Lance said, these people haven't done anything so far. We'll see what this court case says. They haven't done anything that's blatantly illegal. They've abided by the law, and some of them have done things that have made the land better. So it's not an all or nothing. But at the same time, I think we also want, because part of what I think is neat about this country is the amount of parks and national spaces that we have that are open to the public, so that even people who live in the heart of California and have never been to a forest in their whole life, if they want to, they can drive a couple hours and they can go be in a forest with everybody else and pay no money to go into said forest.
Right.
And people don't realize there are countries around the world where you can't do that. It doesn't exist, But
that all started, 120 years ago.
Sure.
When President Theodore Roosevelt started to set aside land and
realized
and even
that,
back in the 1880s, if you go with some of the, John Muir and some of the naturalists who said, gee, we need to start setting this aside because we're losing it.
If we sell it all to private
what would
owners,
they say today? Think of what we've sold and, and then you've got, and we're not even, and we're out of time and we're kind of going, but then we didn't talk about Anwar and, the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge of Alaska with oil. And so where do you draw the line? What's okay, to sell?
And what do you need to keep?
And what do you need to keep? And how do you manage it? And
not just for public enjoyment.
This is another question. It's the same question that we've been dealing with for the last 120 years. And I guess what I got from this today is that it's still an issue that we need to be concerned about.
Yeah.
That's the biggest thing.
People need to know, and Lance and I did until we saw this.
This is an ongoing situation that needs people's attention.
Yeah. Do take time to look at the article, because I think, like a lot of things, that when the Times chooses to do kind of a piece like this, a raise awareness, which is what they usually do, like in the Sunday paper. It's not typically their during the week coverage as much, but they usually do a pretty good job of trying to make sure that they've given you a lot of different angles to look at. And I think they do here, but take time to read it, and also be thinking about, we probably have to do another show on this at some point. Where is that line? What should that rule be? When do we have to say no, and that it has to be owned by the public? But also, we don't want to just be dumb and say no all the time. There are obviously limits. We also don't want housing prices to just, skyrocket nationwide at some point, because we've got, hundreds of millions of acres available, but we're not using them. So people are living in squalor and paying a fortune for housing, when if we took a little bit more of the land, we wouldn't have that problem. So there is, like with everything, two sides at least, and probably more. So let us know your thoughts at TrueChat.org on social media, at TrueChat.org. And go to thestateofus.org, thestateofus.org, for this article that we're referencing today and the others from previous episodes as well. Lance, people want to tune in, they can go to thestateofus.org and listen right there.
Sure.
They can also get all the links to listen. Where are a few of those places that we've linked to?
You can go to Stitcher, my personal favorite, Spotify. You can do Apple Podcast, and anywhere else fine podcasts are found.
For The State of Us on TrueChat in Urbana, I'm Justin T. Weller.
And I'm Lance Jackson.
Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Be the change.